Hello everyone, this is Jessica and I'm coming to you from inside my studio. Today we're going to talk about two tools in the art world that are not as well known as they should be because their operation is a little bit mysterious. The first of those, I already put a video up just about how it works because so many people don't understand it, and that is the water brush, and you'll find the mechanics of the water brush, an explanation of how to fill it and how it works in another video right on my channel. One of the star things that a water brush does is work beautifully with watercolor pencils. And so I want to take us there first, and we can learn two things at once: how the brush works with paint, how watercolor pencils are meant to be used, and how the results can really surprise you. What I have here for supplies is not very complicated. I grabbed just a few watercolor pencils. These happen to be Caran d'Ache and a couple of Caran d'Ache Museum. They're just on my desk because I recently used them, and so I thought, well, let's just go with this for the time being. And I have a pencil and eraser, which is my best friend. Anytime I'm going to plan anything out. I have a fine liner. This is a Pitt pen in a small, or 0.3. And I have a piece of watercolor paper that's 100% cotton. Always what you want if you can get it. If it's too expensive and you can't, then a mixed media paper will do, but something heavy enough that's not going to go all to pieces when you introduce any water to it. And the other thing right here that's just a little off camera is a folded paper towel. So that's all you need to create a very nice little watercolor, and that's what we're going to do. I always start by drawing, and I always start by drawing with a pencil and eraser, and I don't care what they say. There is no enemy thing about an eraser. It does not inhibit your creativity. In fact, it's a big tool because you have permission to make any mark you want to make. You know, you can erase it and move it, and in the composition of a piece of art, that's really important because that's a creative process. So should I put this here? Oops, I don't like it there. I want to put it here. So you can erase it and you can move it. We're going to do something very simple today, and we're going to draw basically a pot. And it can be any pot that you like, any shape. I'm here in Santa Fe, and so there's an awful lot of this type of pot here, which is basically a terracotta or really basic clay pot. Okay, and once we have the pot, we're going to put simplistic plant in here, and the real simplistic plant that's fun and easy to draw is like a yucca or aloe vera kind of plant, and those are just big sword leaves like this, and I just make them go a couple of directions. They stick up pretty high. That one's kind of flat. See, this is why I love having my eraser. That was really kind of ugly. I mean, we could have been looking at it from the side, but I don't want to. I want it to be nice and plump like the rest. Okay, and you don't even need this many leaves. And I'm still not liking this one. Just something. I want more curve here. It's, I don't know, being too fussy. But I just like the feeling of something doing a little more curving over here. All right. And we are going to set this on a table. And we're going to indicate that by just a line. And I always turn my paper sideways to do this in hopes of getting them in the same place on both sides of the object. If you turn it back around and it doesn't look right, then fix it. All right. Now we could start right from here. Most of the time I like to work with watercolor and ink. And so I'm going to use the fine liner. This is my process for almost everything I draw. And I'm just going to go over my pencil. Now this is a rough watercolor paper, so it's going to give me a bumpy line with some personality. And that's okay. I like that. It's not going to be a perfectly smooth line, but it's going to be a line that looks like it was drawn on rough watercolor paper. All right, so it looks like what it is, and we're glad. And going around and inking that part. Got to make sure I stay on camera here. There's the bottom. And then I have a ruler here, and I'm better at seeing whether something is going straight across horizontally or not if I have a shape to look at, so I can judge. I'm just eyeballing this space and the space to the top and trying to get something that I think looks like it's right, and then I'll put my ink line, which isn't coming off, so we want to kind of put it in the right place. Ink pens, they dry right away. So I am able to come back in and get rid of any extraneous pencil lines. And there we go. I have a little eraser pickup vacuum over here, so I'm just going to knock this on the desktop meanwhile, and I will vacuum it up in a few minutes. Okay, now we're ready to look at how you paint with pencils. And it's not like how you do regular colored pencils. With regular colored pencils, the idea is to lay a lot of pigment down and to layer over it, and then later you burnish it to get kind of a shine and a blend. With watercolor pencils, it's a different situation. So if you put a heavy layer of watercolor pencil down, you get too much going on when you come back to wet it. So the process is that you put your color, your shading, everything that you think that you want in that shape, and you'll see exactly how lightly I'm going to do it. And so all that is in place, and all you need to do then to enliven everything is to come back with the water brush and turn it into paint. And so we're going to avoid having like no control over blending by not putting too much color on in the first place. So this is going to be a terracotta pot. And a terracotta pot is probably going, I like to work, when I work with pencils, I like to work with triples. Triple color in a family, a light, a medium, and a dark. So this is like a yellow ochre, and this is something like a burnt sienna, and this is a burnt umber, raw umber. All right, so that's going to be a little darker brown. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to lay this light color in here, and I'm hardly holding the pencil. I am certainly not putting any pressure on it. But I'm going to lay this light color, this is a yellow ochre, over most of the midsection here. We're not going to need too much of it at the sides or the bottom, because that's where we're going to go into midtones and shadow. And so this yellow, by the time we do that, this yellow ochre is going to wash in there and give us some nice blends, but we're not going to need a lot of yellow at the edges. Okay, our midtone. We're going to put our midtone all over also, but go closer to the edges. And we're just going right over the top. And I'm going to leave a space right here where I'm not going to put too much, because I'm going to have my light come from this side. It's unusual for me, so I'll probably mess this up. Usually I light from the upper left. It's just habit is what I do. So I thought I'll challenge things and do it differently. All right, I'm going to build up the midtone here. And again, no pressure on the pencil. Just letting it be in there. And you see that it's not going into the valleys of the paper at all. And it doesn't have a lot of life either at this point. Right in here, we're going to have a little more of that. And then I'll take my burnt umber, make sure, or raw umber, and that is going to go into my shadow area. So this is a darker brown. And again, I'm getting closer in and I'm not as widespread with it, but I'm not putting any pressure. I'm just putting some pigment here. What these watercolor pencils are not watercolor at all, actually, but they are soluble medium that's not gum arabic, and that's what makes them not watercolor, because by definition, you have to have gum arabic to be watercolor. But there are other differences. The pigment particles, which are so finely ground in watercolor, are not so finely ground here. They're a little rougher, and they move a little more slowly, and that can make for nice things happening, as you'll see. So if we were to stop here, we'd have one heck of a boring pot, because we don't have a lot of color and it's all kind of flat and so on. But now we're going to bring the magic to the party. And when you open your water brush, you want to brush your hand a little bit. Make sure that the tip is wet and not too wet. And you want to make sure it hasn't been standing on its head and dripped extra water and, you know, all those things. It should just be damp, okay? And right here we have our paper towel so that we can lose water if we have to, pick up pigment if we have to. But watch what happens here. This comes alive. And you always start in your light area. If you were to start in your shadow area, you're going to wash all that shadow in and not have the light area anymore. And so we're going to, and again, we're working really light, but look at that. Look at that coming alive and being beautiful. I'm going to stop right there just to let you see what an amazing, amazing difference. And so here is where your creative soul can just sing. We're going to work our way into the darker area of the pot and all the way over here where our shadow is. And see how magic this is? All of a sudden, you got all your tones there. You got your values and your darks, your lights, your everything that you want to go on here. I'm turning it to do this rim because it's easier for my hand. I am, again, going to come up from the light area because I don't want to lose my beautiful light color there. So, I'm coming back this way. I'm not going to wash this into here. I'm going to clean my brush off, and look at that. That's how you clean your brush off, just like that. You don't even have to squeeze it. It's amazing. Okay, and I'm going to bring this into this shadow area. Now tell me that's not a gorgeous thing that happens here to this color. And this is why you're seeing right now, I think, why you didn't want to pile up a whole bunch of pencil, also known as pigment, on here. And right here I'm going to need blending. So I'm going to come in. I'm not going back toward the center, coming out from the light into the darker area. And then this is a rough pot. So at this time you get to just mess around a little bit. I went over the line here, and I'm going to show you something wonderful about that in a minute too. Until you like it, and I like this. This is nice and rustic and quite vibrant and beautiful. If you remember what this looked like a couple minutes ago, you can back the video up and see for a comparison. But I like this. Not too bright, not too defined right here, because this clay is rough. This is not a glazed clay. So we want to keep that texture and the roughness. And there we are. Now, another wonderful thing about watercolor pencils and water brushes is that you haven't really put a whole bunch of wet down here. And so we want to work on our leaves. And I'm going to pick a a medium green, like an olive green, and this is not it, but this is a real deep green, a museum pencil, phthalocyanide green. I can't read it. Yeah. And that's a beautiful, rich shadow color. And then I'm going to use my yellow ochre again for my highlights and my leaves, and that's going to harmonize these two because the yellow ochre is going to be in both places. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start, I'm just working one leaf at a time, and I'm putting a little bit of yellow, and then the mid-tone, and again, very light, because we just don't need that much. But there, I want more green than yellow, so just leave the yellow in there. And then the deep green just at the edges. And I'm going to finish just this one leaf, and then we'll do another one. And then I won't make you sit through the whole thing. But you're going to see what a beautiful difference the water brush makes when it gets to town. Again, starting in the light and letting that blend into the mid-tone and the dark. Now we got a lot less space here, and I am using a small tip water brush, a Niji brand, which is my favorite and has always been my favorite for about 20 years, just because it has such a nice flow. I don't like that line, so I'm going to make that a little more textured. Bring some shadow up at the edge of the pot. And there we go. And let's do a second one, and then we can go on and finish them and speed it up or come back or do something that's less boring than sitting and watching. Okay, in between, I am just cleaning my brush like that. Now, when you use a red or something, it's going to be just another little step, and you're going to just squeeze out a drop of water and then do this. And that cleans the brush. There's no swishing. It's really wonderful. Okay, one more leaf, and then you can work on your own with the rest of them. Again, putting the light for first. Okay, and then the mid-tone green. And then the shadow green. And again, these can be any pencils you've got. You're just talking light, middle, and dark. Like instead of the yellow ochre, if we had a spring green or something here, we could be doing that. Some aloe and yucca are have a lot of blue, and so that would be a fun thing to add. And here we come back with this. Again, it's starting from the light and working. I've just dotted the brush off so that I'm not carrying too much dark on it. And that's really the reason that you clean the brush in between. It's just so that you haven't loaded it up with dark so much that you're going to lose your light area when you go back. So that's important. All right. Okay, so we're going to turn off the camera, finish the leaves, and be back to show you quite a number of other things. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you another magic trick, and that is a cleanup trick. And so what I have is a clean water brush. I squeezed it to make sure, and a tissue, just a face tissue, because it's soft and absorbent. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to clean up any little mess I made. Here is where you fall in love with really good cotton watercolor paper, because it just takes a beating and does not pill up and does not come apart on you. So we have a damp water brush here. I have gone out of the lines pretty severely on this side. And so I'm going to fix that, even though in a minute you're going to see I really didn't need to because of what I'm going to do to this area. But I want to show you about fixing accidents. So you scrub the place with the brush and you dot with the Kleenex. It removes a lot of it. You clean your brush because you want to always come in with clean water. And you don't try to spread this out, you just try to clean it up in the space it's in. And sometimes I poke at the edge like that. I work in from the outside, not out from the inside. And you can get a lot of your accident repaired this way. It depends how well this works on the staining quality of the color that you're using. Some of it works fantastic, and some of it's a little more stubborn. So I'm going to leave there right now, and I'm going to work on my green up here a little bit. And by the way, this works to clean up regular watercolor too. Same way to go after your out of the line trouble areas. And this green actually picks up quite a bit better. I hope you can see that. I've still got eraser here. There's, everything is not. It's supposed to be a little crusty because it's rough paper. So you're going to notice I do not use that phrase. It doesn't have to be perfect. If I hear that one more time, I might just explode. It's just so overdone. It doesn't have to be perfect, and probably couldn't be, but it has to be the best you can make it because that's what'll make you feel good. And so I just don't use that phrase. All right. That looks a little rough up here. I must have been on a bad angle when I did that. Okay, but clean enough is clean enough. Now what I did here was I lost a little bit of color. And in fixing that, I'm going to be showing you another really magical thing about the water brush and watercolor pencils. So I am going to find my raw umber, and I'm going to that's a shadow area, so I'm going for the raw umber. I'm just going to touch this lead. Now, don't do it like I did it over this, because if you get it too wet, it's a good way to make splatter, which we'll do in a minute, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I want splatter or not. But anyway, I'm just going to add in. Look at that. It's so wonderful, because if you did this with watercolor, you'd have an issue about whether it was going to bleed back in and make those cauliflower rough edge things. Cauliflower clouds, I call them. And it didn't do that at all. And it's really nice because there's not tons of moisture. It's a different animal. It's thicker pigment and it moves more slowly. So I was even able to do leaves next to each other, which you can't in watercolor. You can't like paint a wet leaf next to a wet leaf because they will join each other. But it isn't so when you're doing this dry application and then wet it later. It kind of makes its own barriers. All right, so with that same thing I was just doing, I want to show you how I put in what I call vignette backgrounds. And they're kind of like they're there and then they're not. And so it just puts the object you just painted in place in its universe, so it's not like floating around. I don't mind floating around, but most people would like a little bit of definition. So I start right at the horizon line here. We're going to make this sitting on an adobe wall or something, so our colors are going to be really similar. And I don't have to do this because you'll see what we do in a minute. But I want to because I don't have to work as hard at getting the start to my color. Okay, I'm going to hold this in my left hand, and it's going to become my palette, and you'll see here. So I'm starting by liquefying my horizon line there. And here's what's wonderful. This is constantly wicking an amount of water. It's controlled by all this gizmo inside of here. And so you see, you're getting your, what they call a, I don't know what they call it. They got a name for it now, but anyway, it's a graduation. You're blending out to nothing. I know you're all sitting there trying to tell me psychic like that. It starts with a B, that word. But it's kind of not in common use all the time. And so we always called this a graduated wash, actually. A lot harder to do with watercolor than it is with this. Okay, I've done that much. At this point, I am going to use the lead as a palette in order to add into my wash here. And I can still stretch out as far as I want before I make this disappear. Now to make it more exciting, I'm going to grab my burnt sienna and I'm going to go right straight to using the lead as a palette. With this, I'm not going to put any down because that is another thing. You don't want to go into a wet area and make a mark with your watercolor pencils. I mean, some people think that the way this should happen is that you dip the lead and you color with it, but this gives you streaks and trouble. It's not something that you want to do. So I'm going to blend this color in. And if you hear my dog barking, it's one of my Siberian Huskies, and they think that they should always be in the studio. And right now they're out in their sunny yard telling me that they ought to be in the studio with me. But we have things to do. All right, I want more yellow to blend this out a little more. And you could call this making a wash with watercolor pencils. And watercolor pencils are not what you grab when you've got to have big, smooth washes. But they're wonderful for this kind of a graduated wash or a vignette where you're going to make that color just go away to nothing. Okay. Now, isn't that a pretty thing? And you can go as far or not as far as you want here. And I have a nice, is this my gray, my bluish gray? Yeah. And I'm going to I'm not going to put a whole sky in or anything like that. I am just going to set the record, if you will, that there's some blue behind here. Now, I'm not touching that yellow with this right now because I don't want to make a blue mark. And I'm not going to add that much. Just lightly, like so. And then I'm going to start to bring it out. And make it kind of go away into a kind of an indication of a sky. And I'm going to take this pencil as well. Now, once you have done this with your watercolor pencils, you want to, after they dry, you want to sharpen them the tiniest bit. Because when you do this with the lead, which is not lead, of course, if you do this kind of paletting, the pencil will dry with a sort of a skin and just won't be as conducive to delivering the dry pigment the next time that you're trying to do that. So it's just a good idea to get that skin off of there, and it just takes a second, just the tiniest bit of... Now what's happening here is that I'm going to squeeze my brush because I have somehow gotten it a little dried out. All right, and I need more moisture, so I went over to my towel. I would never, ever squeeze it in place here because it would be just taking the biggest gamble. You have no idea what would happen. when you squeeze it, quite a lot of water comes out. So you could make a mess that you didn't want to make. Okay, so you could take this as far as you want it to. I mean, you could go up here if you wanted to, but all I want to do here is just set this potted plant in place. And I decided, no, I don't want any speckles. If you wanted speckles, you could get the lead really, really wet and then do this kind of thing on it, and you would throw some pigment specks around. But as I'm looking at this, I don't really want it. I like the subtlety here and here. And so what we've done in this video is that we have used watercolor pencils as paint by applying them dry and using the water brush to blend them. And you can use a regular paintbrush to blend this, and a lot of people do, but I'll tell you, it is not as easy because the regular brush has to be re-wet and damped off. I mean, you can't come in here with any dripping watercolor brush and have that much water and then not have any, and then have, this is giving you this constant even moisture. And I could stay in here playing with this as long as I wanted to, because it's not going to dry out on me, and I'm going to have a consistent amount of water. I'm not going to flood it either. And so this is a wonderful marriage of tools here, this with the cotton watercolor paper. And if you're a texture fiend like I am, the cold press or the rough is what you want. This will certainly work on hot press paper as well, but it gives so much lovely texture the way that it looks on the rough or the cold press. If you created this painting with me, then you may have fallen in love with watercolor pencils. And if you were just watching, you also might have fallen in love with them. If you would like to do more work like this, I have a 2.5-hour class on Skillshare called Painting with Watercolor Pencils, and we paint a similar kind of pot, but as a part of a whole scene, and we paint a lot of other things, and in the process we create an illustrated color chart to guide you in picking a base travel set or just a basic set of colors, of 15 colors that will serve you for just about anything you need to paint. So that's an exciting class. If you are not a Skillshare member, I offer the very same class on my website. My classes are $20. I keep them priced very low because that's helpful for everyone. I will put the links to both of these classes in the description below. So we'll be back with other wonderful marriages of these and of the water brush with other media that you'll really enjoy. See you next time.